is February the 26th. We have news that came out a few hours ago from Cisco of a pretty large cut they're going to be making in their business. So it's not clear if the cuts will be started in April or if they'll be concluded in April. And my guess is they'll probably be concluded in April, and the cuts will probably begin at any moment. But just a few bullets on this update for Cisco. 6% decline in revenue year over year is what they've reported in their last earnings. Their cut will be made up of 4,200 roles, which is 5% of their current organization. They cut 4,000 roles, which was a 5% cut at the time, in 2022, at the end of 2022. So now this is the next wave of cutbacks that they are making. I think it's interesting to point out that it's unfortunate this is the way these things usually play out. You think that a layoff is sort of one and done. They've done all their projections, all their forecasting. You know, these companies have an incredible amount of data at their disposal. They have entire teams in their financial departments who are constantly analyzing the future as far out as they possibly can, using all the data available to them to understand where businesses are heading. And they make these cuts, right, with as much of that forward-looking info as they can. And even still, you know, just a year and a few months later, roughly a year and a couple months later, you know, a whole nother round of a 5% cut being needed or, you know, decided. So these things suck. There's just no, you know, there's no knowing exactly how they're going to play out once the blood is in the water. So the cuts that they are making are going to be reported to be affecting the San Jose, Milpitas, and San Francisco areas, as well as the kind of Research Triangle area, North Carolina, which has a bit of a tech hub over there. And so 4,200 roles from one company coming this year, and primarily focused in Silicon Valley. So you got to believe there will be some ripple effects from that. And we'll see probably by, you know, middle end of this year how broad those ripple effects are. Whether it'll start to affect real estate remains to be seen. The Bay Area real estate has continued to be hyperinflated. It's honestly insane with mortgage rates now and asking prices, that combination. It's remarkable that anyone is buying in the Bay Area, but I do think that it has slowed quite a bit just from my own anecdotal perspective. So as you can see, Cisco's down for the day. Where are they at? They've lost almost a full percentage. All right, I've brought over Nike into the conversation today. Not exactly a tech company, but I thought it was notable to bring them up. And, you know, they've obviously adopted a lot more technology and have kind of invested and leaned into more kind of technological things inside of their business. So they're eliminating 1,500 jobs. This was reported a couple weeks ago. That constitutes 2% of their workforce. First round's already begun, but they are ongoing all the way through the end of May this year. They've fired their VP of Technology, Innovation, and Marketing. That's interesting. It's an interesting role. Technology and innovation obviously being very closely aligned with one another, but then the marketing piece being kind of thrown in there. Seems like that would be kind of a tough role to measure success in, potentially. And the last thing for this note was that, you know, they're considered highly innovative. They're working on a lot more software and mobile app projects and also doing some things in Web3, which is interesting. Let's get a quick refresh on the Nike ticker here. They're also down for the day, a little over a full percent. And what markets are going to close in a couple hours. But what is their 5-day looking like right now? So up 1% for 5-day, but continuing, let's just see year to date, and still down 1.8% for 2024. So jumping over to Rivian, we talked about Rivian in Friday's episode and our update for the week there. They've made their announcement of cuts that they are making given the high interest rates and slowing demand in EVs. So I thought this was an interesting little article from Business Insider, essentially just an account from somebody who finally got laid off. And I'll read a little bit of this. It's just basically the person's story. And, you know, again, this is all a lot of generic numbers and data coming in. but every single role that's being eliminated here, this is a person's job and livelihood. And on the other side of that, right, is debt, is loans, payments, utilities, all of which have skyrocketed for all of us in the last few years now. So there is a tremendous amount of pain and suffering. And, I forget that statistic from the Great Financial Crisis movie with Christian Bale. I'm forgetting the name now. But, essentially they make that point of, how much suicide increases with every percentage point of joblessness as that number increases. And it's unfortunate. It's sad, truly. And I might say that as somebody who has been laid off before in tech, and it being kind of out of the blue in my case. And I know that pain. But I'll read a little bit of this as well because I thought it was just an interesting perspective. So I was filled with anxiety the entire day. I kept thinking, how many times can I possibly go through this annual culling of the herd? It's a terrible feeling, and I'm still processing it. I think I'm at the acceptance phase now, where I'm just glad I don't work at a company where I'm wondering if I'll have a job every year. So this person basically had gone through several rounds of layoffs and was feeling kind of jaded to the situation. Money didn't always feel so tight at Rivian. It's been strange watching the aggressive cost cutting over the last few years. I remember the week we got the big Amazon investment and the investment from Ford. I used to jokingly call the money from the Bezos bucks with my friends. We'd spend $40 on Grubhub for lunch, and it seemed like every team that wanted a piece of software could get it. We had so many redundant services and apps that all did the same thing. It felt like the Wild West. Post-IPO, a lot of those old tech habits died hard. It was difficult to change our spending habits, and in 2022, I finally felt like we no longer had infinite money. I don't blame the leadership at Rivian because I don't think it was a strategic problem. There are a lot of things outside of the control of the company. I have heavy stakes in the stock since I worked there for so long, so I want the company to succeed. Considering interest rates and cash on hand, it's also hard to see a positive outlook. So, again, just sad reality of things. And even if you are somebody in these companies that has gone through rounds of layoffs and have survived, you just never know when it's going to come and get you. And we need to hold things loosely, and we need to make sure that we are in a good place financially, and especially if we have family and have people to take care of and dependents, those things are even more important. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the sort of comparison to 2000, right? The last big tech-specific slaughter, layoffs, and companies going under. There were a couple things that stood out as far as parallels, but ultimately this is, I think, a very different situation. And we'll look back once everything has settled and be able to better assess maybe cause and effect a little bit more thoroughly. But in 2000, when the 2000 bust happened, there was lots of low interest cash flowing into tech, and that spawned a ton of startup companies. So that was exactly, a very similar thing. You had companies like AOL and Time Warner merging. You had that giant merger that took place, and that gave sort of the business world this perspective on tech that there was something special there. And obviously that didn't pan out great for either company at the end of the day. But that's sort of the lesson here, is that most of these moments of deep recession within tech specifically just comes out of the boom-bust reality of that industry. Anything that can be immediately a global product, which a piece of software can, you're going to have a tremendous amount of volatility. And it'll be really interesting how things play out with AI and automation as those things actually finally become tangible products that can be implemented into companies and organizations at scale to actually help, truly streamline, and ultimately are now reaching a point of sophistication that you can eliminate jobs. You can actually start getting rid of teams of people and replacing them with AI. So, so another point here that was kind of, again, very specific thing, the bubble, 2000s tech bubble burst when volatility skyrocketed and the fear of the clock problem. So some of you will probably remember the clock problem. Everyone had I forget where it originated, but the fear was that, and mainly this was Microsoft, because, Microsoft operating system was essentially the main computer operating system of every company and organization out there. The fear was that the clock wasn't going to be capable of actually going from 1999 to 2000, to the year 2000. Like, it wasn't programmed correctly in order to make that switch, and that would just create this huge chaos with all these systems and computers that were then, or I should say more so now, running systems and were interconnected with, actual internet and web technologies, all of that. So there was this fear that it was going to just implode all of these complex systems once the year 2000 came and that clock tried to go to 2000. Seems really dumb now thinking back that was going to be a problem. But anyways, it wasn't a problem, but that triggered a lot of volatility and fear in tech and in investing and betting on tech. So March 13th, 2000 came, and that's when Japan entered a recession. Now Japan has been and is a major tech player. Of course, lots of electronics come out of there, and at the time, a lot of hardware and circuits and PCBs and things like that, components, all came from Japan, or a lot of them came from Japan. So their recession absolutely had a trickle-down effect to the tech industry. And then later in the year 2000, Microsoft lost their monopoly case. That kind of was not as economically significant, but more so just a signal in an already sort of volatile industry that maybe tech wasn't safe, and it shouldn't continue to be invested in if one of the major players that had one of the biggest impacts in tech now lost this massive case as being a monopoly. So and then in by 2004, nearly 500,000 jobs in IT had been lost, and that was mostly focused within San Francisco, San Jose, and Boston. Again, the research triangle on the East Coast there, part of that sort of space, you could say. But San Francisco and San Jose, Silicon Valley hit very, very hard. And ultimately, at the end of the day, companies like Amazon and eBay came out unscathed. eBay now basically is just a shell of what it once was, and especially when PayPal parted ways, they obviously have disappeared into irrelevancy, especially now with things like Facebook Marketplace and OfferUp and Craigslist obviously coming to the forefront as a very easy to use and free option for selling things. So yeah, very outdated business model. I don't even know how they are in business anymore. I don't even know where they make money at this point, but I guess people still use them. So, and then, Google and Yahoo, right? Search engines that solved a real problem for the internet, which was actually being able to find things as the internet exploded and millions of websites came online in early 2000s. Google and Yahoo solved a problem by creating a sort of singular place to go to then be able to access all the content of the web. And the industry reinvented itself. Many companies have flourished since this happened, and I think this is exactly what's going on now. So the comparison to 2000 is there's some parallels, but at the end of the day, this is another moment of money flowing in mass and going into some decent ideas, some not so decent ideas. And there will be winners and losers in a major way. Right now, it's kind of just an amplified moment of that, and we will see which companies come out on top and basically end up surviving because their products or their business model is better than the rest. That's pretty much it for today's episode. So just wanted to cover a few things, mainly the Cisco thing happening earlier in the day, and we'll catch you in the next episode.